Welcome back to the workshop and studio, and today we're going to be discussing 2x72 grinder belts. What you should buy, what applications are good for what belts, and so on. When I started out working with my 2x72 grinder that I built right here in this studio, that was one of the most confusing things, was trying to figure out exactly what I should buy. Because you can go out there and you can waste a ton of money just trying to figure out exactly what's going to work for you. Now, I do some knife making, so this is going to be primarily focused on that. But if I reference knife making or steel or anything like that, you can pretty much guarantee that if I'm grinding down a piece of high carbon steel, it's going to work for mild steel and aluminum and brass and so on. So I'm going to go all the way back to the beginning of the grit set and then work our way up. We're going to climb the ladder in the grit set. We're going to go from the first step all the way up. So when I start profiling a knife, the first thing I want to do is grab a ceramic belt. And this is a VSM 36 grit XK885Y ceramic belt. The reason why I'm going to grab this is because I don't want to mess around. I want as much material removed as quickly as possible in the shortest amount of time, and a ceramic belt is going to do that for you. You'll hear me discuss the differences between ceramic and aluminum oxide and so on. Primarily though, for these early stages of stock removal, we're going to be using ceramic belts. Once you've got your blade profiled or you've got whatever you wanted off of your steel with a 36 grit belt, you're going to move up to a VSM XK885Y 60 grit ceramic belt. Okay, so you can see the progression. We're going from 36 to 60, and the reason is now we've taken a majority of the stock off of the piece of steel, and now we want to start refining it. So you don't have a ton of control with the 36 grit. I mean, it's really just designed to go in and remove things quite quickly. At 60 grit though, you're in the position where you're removing stock. It's not heating up the metal too much. There isn't, but there isn't a lot of lines being formed in a good piece of steel. So one of the things we talk a lot about is temperature. So you're rubbing this across a surface of steel over and over and over and over. The longer and harder you have to push into that platen with these belts on, the hotter your steel is going to get. And if anybody's ever ground down a piece of steel without wearing gloves, they know that feeling of, hey, that steel's getting hot quick. What you'll notice is when you go to the 36 grit, you're grinding away and it's hogging out material, but it's doing it in such a way that it's pulling it off of the piece of steel faster than it can heat it up. And that's the reason why we go this grit. Moving up to the 60, you're going to notice that the steel is going to get a little bit hotter as you move forward. You're going to notice that, hey, it's hogging material off, but this piece of steel is getting warm. So you're going to want to be dunking your piece of steel or keeping it cool in some way, shape, or form. Again, this is a great way to remove stock by having a little bit more control. All three of these belts, by the way, are ceramic. So the first stages are always going to be ceramic. Once we're done with our 60 grit, we feel like we're comfortable with that. I typically heat treat my blades. They are at that point profiled and about 50% beveled. They're gonna have a nice groove down the sides, and the steel is gonna be starting to take shape in the form of what I want. However, at that point I stop, because by the time we get to 100 grit, you're going to be warming that piece of steel to the point where you could actually warp it if you're not careful. In fact, I've done that many times. And someone I talked to on the regular said, you're not heat treating your blade early enough. You need to go and harden it first, then continue up above the 60 grit belts. So the next stage is going to be the 100 grit. And this is again in the XK885Y series from VSM. The 100 grit is going to be where you are going to hog down quite a bit of material on the sides for your bevels. Although I will say, after hardening, I will go back to a 60 grit and continue with my bevels. It's a kind of a love-hate relationship. You're removing a lot of stock. At the same time, you're creating lines and grooves in your steel. and that is creating more work for you in the back end, because you're going to have to remove those lines at some point if you want a nice polished blade. And I hate hand sanding. So as much I can do on the grinder as possible is really important. That's why a hardened blade, you're running it over a 60 grit belt, you're taking down, you're hogging down, you're getting your bevel set, and then at what point do you switch over to the 100 grit VSM belt? By the way, I'm not sponsored by VSM. I just really like their products. They're inexpensive, actually. They're a polyester belt. So what that means is the material on the back side here is polyester. That these are brand new belts, but once they're used, they are really flexible. They kind of have a nice feel to them. They don't break real often, and they're inexpensive. For the money, VSM, I think, is the way to go. I'm super impressed with this product. I think it's a fantastic product. We're moving up the grits. We're in our 100 grit. You're probably at this point starting to refine your bevels. Your bevels are in, but you're going to be polishing them down a little bit more and bringing those edges in a little bit. And that's what's the 100 grit is really good for that. And then once you get past the 100 grit, you're going to be into the finishing belts. These two belts are both made by 3M. Again, I'm not affiliated with them. These are what's called a Trizact belt. Super unique belt, okay? I don't know what kind of alien technology this is. They call it some sort of micro replicated brick or something along those terms. Basically what this is these little tiny squares that are built into these belts, cloth back. This is a 100 grit, this is a 220. And what this does is, so you're using those ceramic belts, right? The VSM belt is grinding and hogging, and you're at 100 grit. You might ask yourself, well, why would I go to a Trizact 100 grit after you've already done 100 grit on the ceramic VSM belt? Well, this is more for refinement, and what you're going to find with one of these is that you're going to get a very consistent grind, okay? I like these because every time I use it, I know exactly what finish I'm going to get from it. I have one of those rubber belt cleaners as well, and these things do tend to sort of clog up a little bit, but with one swipe of that rubber belt cleaner, this thing comes completely clean, and it's almost like a brand new belt again. I've used this belt for a few months, both of these belts for a few months. They're beat all up, but they work like the day I purchased them, which I think is pretty amazing. It's some sort of weird alien technology. Actually, this is a 120 grit, not a 100. So you're climbing up a little bit higher in the grit set anyhow. But so what I like to do with these is, typically when I'm hogging off material, I'm at that 100 grit VSM ceramic. All of my lines are typically in one direction. When I move over to these Trizact belts, I'm actually turning my blades a little bit and sliding them left and right and turning them. And what I'm doing is I'm creating alternative patterns so that I can see just how far I need to go down into the steel before I meet that next belt requirement. So as long as I don't see any lines going that other direction, I know, okay, I've managed to polish off just enough steel to go up to the next grit, which is a 220. And again, it's a Trizact belt. This is a 3M A65. This one's an A160. They're a little pricey, but they last a long time. I mean, you're gonna get a lot of life out of these. And I don't buy very many a year. I probably buy maybe 3 a year because you're not doing a ton of work with them. You're really getting up to that refinement stage with the VSM belts and the ceramic belts. So these really are just to kind of get all those grooves and lines off of your steel. And at that point, you're at a 220 grit, and then we're at now talking about actual finish work. You can climb up into the 400s if you want, and I think I have some of those belts. But typically, I do something that's not really, I don't know, people frown upon it in the community of making knives, but I move up to a Scotch-Brite belt. Let me show you that. I've got a set of 3. These things are amazing. So these are called woven. I don't think they can use Scotch-Brite, as I know Scotch-Brite actually makes these, but these are not Scotch-Brite brand. I got these on Amazon. These are, I don't know what they call them. I'll have to look it up. It's like a woven something or other. It's a very strange name because they can't use Scotch-Brite because it's trademarked. But this is in different grits, actually. It starts with the brown belt, which is a very heavy grit, and you'll be surprised at how much this actually takes the blade and refines it down. It's amazing. Whenever I'm having a hard time on a bevel or something, I grab one of these and I can kind of, you know, massage it and work it in a little bit. It's really nice. And then I think you move up to the maroon belt. Pretty sure maroon. There was no instructions that came with these. This set was like 50 bucks. Totally worth buying. Whenever I'm in a rush and I need to just polish something down or take mill scale off, these things are great. I jump right from the 220 to this and then finalize it with this blue belt, which is the highest grit. Sometimes I don't even use this one. It's you know, these two belts over here will just do what I want it to do. And at that point, we're moving into hand sanding. Okay, so once you're finished with the woven Scotch-Brite belts, you know, you're at the point where you're probably going to want a hand sand. And again, we're taking those blades and we're moving them across the belts in different angles, different trajectories. You don't want to be grinding at the same one because you're just creating the same valleys in that steel. If you're turning it slightly, you'll be able to see those valleys and you'll be able to polish them out. And that's what I like to do. So that's how I climb up the ladder, the grit set of my 2x72 belts. And as far as purchasing these, you can get some of them on Amazon. I'll put links down in the description so you can find some. You know, these I got on Amazon. I don't think they're in stock anymore. You can go on there and look. The VSM belts, there's a company called True Grit that I buy them through. I'm not affiliated with them in any way. I buy them from them online. In fact, I got the Trizact belts from them as well. Small little family-run operation. They're not like a big corporation, so you know, you call and you can talk to whoever over there and order your stuff. Or their website is really easy to use, and I just go on there and filter down what I'm looking for or whatever. But once you get into a groove, you know what you want to buy. You just keep buying the same thing over and over. Last but not least, for the metal portion of this discussion, is the Norton Norax belts. These are ceramic, I guess. I don't use these very often. This one is a 1200 grit, a U936 X16. This is 1200 and this is a 600 grit. And the reason why I keep these around is because I put my edges on with my 2x72 grinder. I can get a really decent edge with these, and this is just to take that final, you know, edge geometry down to get a nice burl on the edge, and then I'll refine it from there with a leather strop or an MDF wheel. But yeah, I keep two of these. I only buy one a year, probably not even that, because it doesn't, they don't take a lot of beatings. You know, you're really just putting an edge on them. You're using them very, very minimally and then putting them away. So yeah, these are worth doing. They're a little expensive. They're made by Norton, yeah, Norton Engineering, I guess. Engineered abrasives. And yeah, they're a really great buy, and they last a long time. And again, you can use that rubber belt cleaner. I highly suggest you buy one of those. They're about, I don't know, $12 or something. This one's beat up, but they last a long time. I highly suggest you buy one of these. Totally worth having. It makes your belts last a lot longer. For 12 bucks, you can probably double the life of every belt you put on your grinder. So yeah, worth having. Let's talk a little bit about non-ceramics for a minute. This is a 60 grit Deer Foss. I don't know, it's a cheapie from Amazon, okay? I buy these on Amazon. 60 grit, non-ceramic. I think this is an aluminum oxide. To be honest, I have no idea. I use these for refining down handles in the early stages of polishing down wood or getting the geometry right on the handle. You'll use something cheap. These last a long time if you just use them on wood and keep them clean with that rubber belt cleaner, and they're not expensive. These are worth buying. This is a set of aluminum oxide belts that I got on Amazon. It was somebody that just basically put together a whole series of different grits in aluminum oxide, so it made it kind of stupid simple to just like buy them and keep them in your set of belts to have. A lot of times when I'm doing a handle, I just need to get something real quick, and these cheap belts really make that happen for me. and I'm not contaminating my wood with steel dust. If you've ever worked with a belt that's been contaminated with steel dust and then you use it on a piece of wood or a piece of resin, that dust can settle down in the wood, and now you're chasing that. You're trying to get that out of the wood. So, you know, I use these aluminum oxide belts pretty specifically just for wood. I don't ever do any steel work with these. Real quick, let's go over how I store my belts. Now, this is the bench where my 2x72 grinder sits, and I made this out of a furring strip. This is just a bunch of really long 4-inch screws drilled into this furring strip right here. And the grit sets go from the the lowest of the grit set all the way to the highest. So for some reason, and I don't really understand this, and maybe someone can explain this to me, they don't always put the grit on the belt. So like these 3M belts, they look pretty much the same. It's like the same color, the same texturing and everything, yet somehow the grit is not written on the belt. So I don't really know what's what. So I end up writing on it with a marker, and then it gets worn down over time. So to take the guesswork out of it, and again, don't really understand this. I don't know why you would make abrasives and not tell us what the grit is. And then make the same belt identical color, and the only difference is the model number. So now you have to look up the... Anyway, rant over. So VSM doesn't do that, by the way. I love that. Thank you, VSM, for putting the grit on the back of the belt. What a concept. So anyhow, 36 grit, 60 grit, 100 grit, 120 grit, 220, aluminum oxide, various Scotch-Brite belts, and then finally the refinement, the edge belts, the Norax, Norton belts here. Again, Norax does not put the grit on the belt. I had to hand write it on there. So yeah, this is how I store everything. And then as I'm working, I can just walk over, grab a belt, put it on my grinder, put it back, grab a belt, put it on my grinder. Also behind me, you see my drill press back there. It's got a bunch of belts dangling from it. Those are belts that are worn and have been used quite a bit. So they're, you know, just hanging there to kind of get used and put in rotation. So sometimes I'll do that when I'm going back and forth, back and forth. I don't put them back on the rack. So yeah, this is how I do it. One thing to consider is these do have some arrows on them, and they are directional. Not all of them. Some of them actually have bi-directional. You can go either way, but in this case, these have a specific direction they want you to use it in. So when you're loading up your 2x72, just make sure the arrow is in the right direction. All right, so this is a brand new 36 grit VSM belt, and we are going to hog off some material just so you can get a feel of what it would be like to use a belt like this. This is A2 tool steel, and it is extremely hard, high in carbon, and it has been heat treated. As you can see, there's no refinement on this blade at all. This is just a flat piece of stock that's been profiled out, and today we're just gonna take down a little bit. We're not gonna take all the way down, but we're gonna start putting in our bevel and our geometry. I always wear a dust mask when I do this, and a bucket of water underneath for cooling, and ear protection. We're gonna run it at about 80% speed, 2 horsepower motor. Two swipes. Pull down the blade. Okay, as you can see here, we hogged off quite a bit of material there in just a few swipes. This is really just a couple of minutes of grinding on this. Already hardened blade. Nice piece of A2 steel here. Heat treated it, and it is about an eighth of an inch thick, and I think we've probably taken at least a 1/16 of an inch off already. We're getting pretty close already to moving up to another grit. I'll probably do a few more swipes with this, and then move up to a 60 grit. But yeah, you can see it's these VSM belts are powerhouses. So as you can see in the lower grit sets, the ceramic belts are really the way to go, and VSM makes a fantastic product. I think these are like in the $5 to $7 range if you buy them through True Grit. Again, I am not affiliated with VSM or True Grit. I just think that their pricing is great, their website's really easy, and their shipping, it comes to you really quick. They ship everything, for the most part, priority mail, so I get everything within 3 to 4 days, which is pretty great. If you got something out of today's video, guys, please hit that subscribe button, and if you hit that little bell notification button, you'll get a notification every single time I upload something to YouTube, which is about once a week now. Also, there are links down in the description for everything you see in my workshop and my studio, and I've broken it down into nice categories so you can actually go in there and find my tools and my supplies. If you're interested just in knife making stuff, I have a whole category in there just for knife making, so you can find the stuff that you need to find pretty quickly and easily. I've taken all the guesswork out of it for you. I just want to say thank you so much for all the comments. I do read and respond to all of them, so if you have any questions, please feel free to chime in and let me know what you're thinking, or if you have a question, I'd love to answer them for you. So it's all about the community, really. And when I got started with knife making or with my workshop stuff, what I discovered was there are a lot of people who are really passionate about this hobby and are really super nice and are willing to help. And I just want to give back by making these videos. So I do appreciate it, guys. Thank you so much. As always, my name is Brian House, and this has been Housework.